Rama Hari 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 Krishna Hari 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 Rama Rama Hari Hari Hare Krishna 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 Hari 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 Rama 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 Hari Hari Hare Krishna 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 Hari 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 Rama Rama Hari Hari Jai Gauravata Prabhu Kadruta Kasturi Manjari Visyam Predanam Ki Jai. Okay, Yadoljan Ответит на вопросов, вопросах. Да. All right, so let's get into it. Let us get into it. So first of all, some prayers. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Welcome. Haribol, welcome. Okay, so here we go. Here's the questions. Oh, what happened? Are there more questions? I don't know.
An email was sent with one more extra question.
Oh, okay, you're right. That's right. Okay, so Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale. Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shatarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatrubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All right, okay, so we have 12 questions. We have 12 questions, devotees. Most of them are from Bhakti Vaibhava students, although only not so many questions, I don't know. Anyway, that's okay. So, let's get started. First question. Why does Srila Prabhupada especially honor Lord Chaitanya in the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam? Well, you know, if you had read a bit of it, if you had looked at it, you would have seen that Srila Prabhupada refers to Lord Chaitanya as the ideal preacher of Srimad Bhagavatam, as the ideal practitioner of the instructions of Srimad Bhagavatam, and therefore, so Prabhupada says, I'm looking at the introduction right now. This is, what is it, the first, second, third, and it's the fourth paragraph of the introduction. In the modern age, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached the Srimad Bhagavatam by practical demonstration. It is easier to penetrate into the topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam through the medium of Sri Chaitanya's causeless mercy. Therefore, a short sketch of his life and precepts is inserted herein to help the reader understand the real merit of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yes, so, that's, in a nutshell, of course, that's really in a nutshell, but it's there. That is the reason. Because Lord Chaitanya, he was the ideal practitioner of Srimad Bhagavatam. His life was just the best demonstration of the meaning, the purpose, and just of everything of Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's why. That's the reason. It's very important. And I assume you must have noticed that Prabhupada gives a long introduction. It may be 50 pages or something. Normally, an introduction to a book, it may be 6 or 7 or 8 or maybe 10 pages, but I don't think it's usually more than that. Not so much, at least. But here, this is really long. And it's all about Lord Chaitanya preaching Srimad Bhagavatam and living Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's the answer there. What is the significance of Srimad Bhagavatam being spoken in Naimisharanya forest instead of, say, Vrindavan, where Lord Krishna appeared? Okay, that's also a good question. I mean, the first one about Lord Chaitanya, it's a very good question, and it's important that if you're studying the Bhagavatam that you understand this point. So, and I could just mention about Lord Chaitanya, is that Lord Chaitanya said that, he made it very clear that Srimad Bhagavatam is he said, natural commentary on Vedanta Sutra, which otherwise was considered the conclusive text of the Vedic literatures. But it's very complex and inscrutable, really difficult to follow and get into unless you really know what you're talking about. Yeah, so the fact that Lord Chaitanya, the Supreme Lord, established that actually Vedanta Sutra is explained by Srimad Bhagavatam, that's extremely important. So second question. What's the significance of Srimad Bhagavatam being spoken in Naimisharanya forest instead of, say, Vrindavan, where Lord Krishna appeared? Okay, the thing is this, and this is something which is not really explored in Srimad Bhagavatam, and Prabhupada doesn't really get into it much, barely at all, if at all, even. But the thing is that Sutta Goswami's father, Sutta Goswami, who's reciting the Bhagavatam, he is known as Ugrashrava Sutta. His father was Romaharshana Sutta, and he was very famous Brahmin and Shastric scholar, and he was a disciple of Vyasadeva, and he directly from Vyasadeva, and through also another disciple of Vyasadeva, Sutta Goswami, when Vyasadeva divided the Veda into all its component parts, the four Vedas, the Itihasas, means the histories, Ramayana and Mahabharata, and then the Puranas, and there are other literatures. They're the Smriti Dharma Shastras, and there's different. But those are the main ones, the four Vedas, the Itihasas and Puranas, but there are others. So, Sutta then was instructed partially by Vyasadeva and partially by another disciple of Vyasadeva, because Sutta's a disciple, Romaharshana Sutta, the father of this sutta who's speaking here in Srimad Bhagavatam. So Romaharshana Sutta was when Vyasadeva divided up the Veda into all the component parts, then Sutta Goswami, some directly and some through the other, his godbrother, disciple of Vyasadeva, was entrusted with the Puranas. So then what he did, when he was given the Puranas, he was given them by Vyas and the other godbrother of his disciple of Vyasadeva. So then he had to speak them. So he went to Naimisharanya, and Romaharshana Sutta spoke the other Puranas. Not Srimad Bhagavatam, of course, but the other 18 Puranas, and there's also Upa Puranas. I don't know so much about the Upa Puranas, but definitely the Puranas. He spoke them to those same sages in Naimisharanya and Shonaka Rishi. But then, it's mentioned in the Bhagavatam, but it happened just before the Bhagavatam was spoken, just shortly before. Then Lord Balaram killed Romaharshana Sutta in Naimisharanya. This was all going on in Naimisharanya. Romaharshana Sutta, the fathers, instructing the same sages in Shonaka in the Puranas until he was killed by Lord Balaram for not standing up, because he, Romaharshana, was sitting on the Vyasasan when Lord Balaram entered the place, arrived in Naimisharanya. And Lord Balaram understood, this person doesn't understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He shouldn't be speaking the Puranas. And he killed him by hitting him, maybe poking him, or at least hitting him with a blade of grass. Kusha grass, which is sacred or at least auspicious. So then the son, Ugrashrava Sutta, took over. Then he took over and he spoke Srimad Bhagavatam. So all the Puranas, as they're recorded, were spoken in Naimisharanya by the father, Romaharshana Sutta, except for the Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by his son Ugrashrava Sutta. Mahabharata was spoken in Naimisharanya. So, all these interesting points are there. So Naimisharanya is really a place where such literatures are spoken. And, yes. Okay. I said we should take Srimad Bhagavatam into the heart. What does this mean? It means you should read it and you should learn it. Just like when you learn something and you really, really, really learn it. Like you learn a language, you learn how to drive a car, how to operate a computer. Certain things You really learn. And then it becomes second nature. And you can almost literally do it with your eyes closed. Yeah, not driving a car, hopefully, but, many things. When someone becomes expert at cooking, like I think the most expert cook, who's the most expert cook? I think it's Mother Radharatnath. Maybe, yeah, but I don't know offhand. But it wouldn't surprise me. So when you get to that level of cooking, you can almost cook with your eyes closed. It becomes second nature. Right. So, yeah, we should study Srimad Bhagavatam until it becomes part of us. And then, we will just exude Srimad Bhagavatam. And that means Srimad Bhagavatam's in your heart. It's just what you are living for and what you are living. So I'd say that's the idea, really. May I ask, is there any particular instruction from Srimad Bhagavatam Your Holiness has taken in the heart? Well, the thing which has struck me the most, I would say, well, two things. One thing is the explanation of Krishna being the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada gives an amazing explanation. Jiva Goswami in Krishna Sandarbha gives a very detailed and lengthy explanation. And that fact that Krishna is the Supreme Personality, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, that I would say is probably what I've taken into my heart the most. But then along with it is the explanation of how the first verse of the Bhagavatam is an explanation of the Brahma Gayatri, Om Bhurabhuva Swatat Savitur, etc. The first verse of the Bhagavatam is an explanation of Brahma Gayatri, and Brahma Gayatri is the definitive verse of the Vedas. It's a Rig Veda verse. So of the four Vedas, Brahma Gayatri is the fundamental, foundational verse which encapsulates the meaning of the four Vedas. Then first verse of the Bhagavatam is an explanation of it. Just a brief, not brief, but a not lengthy explanation, elaboration. But then the understanding is that the rest of Srimad Bhagavatam is an explanation of the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is an explanation of Brahma Gayatri, which is the foundation of the four Vedas. So in other words, Srimad Bhagavatam just encapsulates the whole of the four Vedas in the most amazing and wonderful way. Is this, in this canto, the Naimisharanya forest is discussed. Are there any other Vedic literatures besides the ones mentioned in the text that discuss the Naimisharanya forest and its significance on the spiritual path of bhakti? Well, yeah, I answered this question already, actually. That Sutta, Romaharshana Sutta, the father of Ugrashrava Sutta, who spoke Srimad Bhagavatam to the sages. So the father, Romaharshana, spoke all the other Puranas at Naimisharanya. And Mahabharata was spoken at Naimisharanya too. So there you go, some other literatures spoken at, discussed at Naimisharanya, because it's a very sacred place. It's the center of the universe. So it was mentioned that listening physically, literally listening to Srimad Bhagavatam, is something special. Could you please explain a little bit more about this listening exercise? Would listening via the internet or listening to the recording be considered real listening? What are the conditions to make online listening real? Well, first of all, the answer in a nutshell is yes, that listening via the internet or via recording is definitely real listening. You know, Srila Prabhupada, particularly later on in the, year or something, maybe a little more than a year, but something like that, before he left this world, Srila Prabhupada would initiate devotees by letter. Previously he traveled around and he would initiate people on the spot. He'd visit everywhere where his movement was. But then later on, he just sent letters that this, this devotee, Bhakta John, his name is such and such, Bhakti Mary, her name is such and such, like that. And for those who got second initiation, he would send a recording, like a cassette. Or I don't know if it was a cassette in those days, but a recording of himself chanting Gayatri. And the devotees being given second initiation, they would receive Gayatri through a recording of Srila Prabhupada. So that's the first point. Don't worry that listening to a recording, or like here, if you're listening right now, listening on the internet, that it's something less than being in person. You know, there may be something, there can be more in the sense of interaction and like that when we're in person. But ultimately, what really matters is the message. We have to hear the instructions. We have to hear the instructions. That's what it's all about. So, and what are the conditions to make online listening real? Well, real is not really the right term. It is real, but what will make it as effective as it could possibly be is that you listen very submissively. You know, of course, I am preparing the classes. I'm up to the 10th, I'm in the 10th chapter now. In our actual lectures, we're in chapter 4, sort of in the middle or somewhere. We're in chapter 4. I'm preparing, of course I have to get ahead. I can't be preparing on the day. So I've noticed how much just in these chapters, which I've been doing, preparing, because I have to read the whole purport, all the verses and the whole purport every time. And I've been noticing how much Srila Prabhupada has been emphasizing certain points. One such point is you have to hear submissively, without challenging, without speculating, these types of things. You really have to drink through your ears the message of the Bhagavatam. You really have to do that. So, if you have that sort of attitude, consciousness, and conviction in your heart when you're listening to these classes and the readings that we're doing, then it'll really penetrate your heart as deeply as it possibly could, depending on how submissive and open-hearted you are to the message. That's the basic idea. So chapter 12. Hare Krishna. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna showed the universal form to Arjuna. Yet chapter 3 of Srimad Bhagavatam says the Virat Rupa is imaginary. Kindly help me understand. Well, it's not only the 3rd chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, it's there in the Bhagavad Gita also, that there is not exactly a universal form, like there's a form of Krishna as a deity, or in the form of his holy names, or in his pictures. The universal form is a mental conception. The rivers, it says, for example, the rivers are his veins. It's not exactly a fact. It's not exactly a fact. The sun and the moon are his eyes. It's not exactly a fact. It's just to help people who, people classically, either people who are real materialistic neophytes who just can't grasp the idea that the supreme, the absolute truth could be a person. It's for them, and it's for impersonalists who also can't grasp that the absolute truth could be a person. And the idea or the hope is that these two categories of people, if they hear about the universal form, and then when they're looking around the world and they see, for example, there's the sun, yes, there's the sun, that's one of the eyes of Krishna. And all the different other things which are mentioned. So, so it's just you could say it's something like an allegory or a fable in principle, in terms of its goal, put it that way. A fable is an imaginary story which teaches a lesson that it'll be good for people to learn. Like I think all of us, when we were children, we studied Aesop's fables. Did you study them? Aesop's fables? Did you? Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, right? The Tar Baby, that one I remember. You don't know about Aesop's fables, really? Okay. So, they're for children, to teach the children lessons. Sour grapes, the story of the sour grapes. Yeah. But I remember the story of, what was it, Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby. the lesson is, it's like curiosity killed the cat. If you're too inquisitive and curious, you can mess yourself up, get into things which are not good for you. So I think Brer Fox, he made a tar baby out of tar. And you know, tar, at least when it's wet, it's very sticky, adhesive. So Brer Rabbit, who's very inquisitive and pokes his nose and everything, he came along and saw this tar baby, and he thought, oh, what's this? And he came up, tar baby standing like this, and with one of Brer Rabbit's paws, he touched the hand of the tar baby and got stuck. And thought, gosh, what to do, how to get free? I know, with my other hand, I'll hold on to the tar baby and then, hold the tar baby and pull my first hand away. But the other hand got stuck too. And I forget what the end was. I guess Brer Rabbit escaped, but there's stories with morals for children, even for adults, to learn lessons in principle. Because there was no Brer Fox. There was no Brer Rabbit. They didn't exist. They're just fictitious characters in fairy stories. That's what they are. And the stories are just constructed. The things never happened. But the stories are constructed so that particularly children will learn, oh, I should do this or I shouldn't do that. So in principle, the universal form is like that. There is no such actual form. But by mentally thinking of different parts of the universe, of the world, as being different parts of the body of a person, of the Supreme Person, then these two categories particularly, the materialists are just too much into, if you can't see it, if I can't see it, I won't believe it. That sort of attitude. Here's something they can see. They can see the sun, they can see the moon, they can see rivers. The mountains are the bones, like the spine, spine is sort of raised. So the mountains are the stacks of his bones. They're not. They're mountains. And rivers are rivers. They're just rivers. And the sun and the moon are the sun and the moon. But they're devices, psychological devices, as an attempt to help these people accept the idea, the initial acceptance that the absolute truth is a person. Then they can go on to become devotees. So that's the idea. Okay. Well, is this now the same person? I'm trying to get a better understanding of the Virat Rupa. Means the universal form. It's said that it's transcendental, but at the same time temporarily manifested. What happens to it when it's unmanifested? I understand the conditioned souls are in a dormant state during the night of Brahma. But does the Virat Rupa just disappear after the destruction of the universe, or does it withdraw itself into Mahavishnu? Well, hopefully I already explained it in just the immediate previous answer. There is no such form. the different things which are said to be the different parts, they're destroyed. At least, it depends what level of distraction, of universal distraction is, because sometimes there's a distraction which does not affect the upper planets. But when there's total distraction, then all the things which are described as if they're part of the universal form, all the mountains, all the rivers, the Brahmins are said to be the head of the universal form. Kshatriyas are like the arms and chest, and the Vaishyas are like the stomach, and the Sudras are the waist. The legs. So all the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras, they're all destroyed. Yeah. So I hope you get the idea. It's an imaginary form. So even now, it doesn't exist. Yeah. And when it does exist, so to speak, it only exists in the minds of these people as concepts to help them accept that the Absolute Truth's a person. Does that make sense to you, George? Does it make sense? Okay. So let's carry on then. Number 9. We mentioned that the Kalki avatar is actually a jiva, but Jayadev Goswami includes him in the Das Avatar Stotra as one of the main 10 incarnations of the Lord. Please elaborate on this. Well, Jayadev Goswami also includes Lord Buddha in the Das Avatar, right? Buddha Sharira, yes. And he is definitely a jiva. So the thing is, these people, when someone is a Shaktivesh avatar, an empowered jiva, means an ordinary living entity like us, but empowered with some special potency of the Lord, then that person, when they act, they're acting as if they're the Lord. They're acting on the basis of the potency of the Lord, not on the basis of just being a human being, for example. So effectively, they're acting as God. And so therefore there's no harm. Not just no harm, but it's quite appropriate for Jayadev to include them in the Dasavatar Stotra, and for Shukadev Goswami to include them, some of them, in Srimad Bhagavatam, because Kalki is in Srimad Bhagavatam. Prithu, same thing. He's a jiva like us, but he's empowered with the dushta shakti, the power to, how does Prabhupada put it? Well, to chastise nonsense rascals who deserve to be chastised. So they're in Srimad Bhagavatam. Kalki's there, Buddha's there. We just discussed a bit about Buddha last week. Was it? Yeah, last week. Yeah, last week. Kalki's mentioned, Buddha is mentioned, Prithu is discussed at length. So it's not a problem, because effectively they're acting as the Lord. Effectively. So number 10, Arjuna was a great devotee and friend of Krishna. then why did Krishna show him the universal form, which is actually non-existent in the spiritual world and is not a true form of Krishna? Well, yes. The answer to that question is that at the end of the 10th chapter, more or less, Krishna has explained to Arjuna about many aspects of the universal form. Many aspects of the universal form in chapter 10. But Arjuna, who understands that the people in Kali Yuga are not really very bright, and they're not necessarily just going to accept that what someone says to them. So, like I said, if I can't see it, I won't accept it. So, therefore, Arjuna thought, on behalf, he's okay, he understands, he's accepted that Krishna's God. But he is afraid that people, skeptics and just so many people in Kali Yuga will not accept. So therefore, he asks Krishna to please what does he say here? Yeah, in the 11th chapter, verse 3, Arjuna, as if inquiring on his own behalf, but actually he's inquiring just for everyone, particularly the conditioned souls. He says that, though I see you here before me in your actual position as you've described yourself, I wish to see how you've entered into this cosmic manifestation. I want to see that form of yours. In verse 4, if you think that I'm able to behold your cosmic form, then kindly show me. So, because he knows many of the people who are going to read this, they're going to be either impersonalists of some sort, or these materialists who are just skeptical about everything. If you can't show me, I won't believe it. It exists. So therefore, Arjuna, we just read, didn't we? Arjuna said that he's okay. He's all right. Yeah. I see you as you've before me in your actual position. So he's not worried. In verse 2, I've heard from you in detail about the appearance and disappearance of every living entity and have realized your inexhaustible glories from what he heard in chapter 10. So, for the sake of the people, he asks Krishna, show me the form which you have described with your words in the 10th chapter. That's actually. So therefore the universal form is what Lord Krishna described to Arjuna in the 10th chapter. Actually seeing all the different parts. Okay, I hope that's clear enough. Where can we read about different incarnations of Krishna which are mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam? Well, many of them you can read about in Srimad Bhagavatam. Like I said, Prithu was mentioned, Kalki was mentioned, Buddha was mentioned, The Purusha avatars were mentioned. Lord Ram was mentioned. Dhanvantari was mentioned. Dattatreya was mentioned. Nrsingadev was mentioned. Kapila was mentioned in the 3rd chapter. But they're elaborately, all these ones I've just mentioned, except for Buddha, all of the other ones I've just mentioned, they're all elaborately described in the Bhagavatam. So there you go. So here's the last question, and this is not from our Bhakti Vaibhava students. What is the meaning of the Maha Mantra? Well, of course, this is something we talk about quite regularly because it's one of the very foundational aspects of what is Krishna consciousness, so it gets a lot of attention from us. But what is the meaning? Maha Mantra, what it means is, my dear Lord Krishna, my dear energy of Lord Krishna, who is Srimati Radharani. So my dear Krishna, my dear energy of Krishna, please engage me in your service. This is what it means. Or to be a little more specific, my dear Lord Krishna, my dear energy, my dear Srimati Radharani, because she is the Hare, please bring me closer to you by engaging me in your service. That's the meaning of the Maha Mantra. So in other words, it's a prayer. It's an appeal for mercy. You know, there are other mantras where you just say, Jai somebody, or Om Namo somebody. It's all very well, it's all very nice. We're offering Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're offering our obeisances, our respects, like we're bowing down before Krishna, who is Vasudev, the son of Vasudev. But that's all we're doing. We're just offering respect. Or like, Jai Shri Krishna. Very nice. All glories to Lord Krishna. Very good. But these are just, there's no appeal. All glories to Krishna just means all glories to Krishna. He's really glorious. Offering my obeisances to Lord Krishna, or to Lord Shiva, or to whoever, just means we're bowing down, offering respect. And it's all very, very good. It's definitely excellent. But Hare Krishna is deeper because it's an appeal. Please bring us closer to you by engaging us in your service. So it's a personal appeal, which means it's deeper. It's really a request for mercy. Bring me closer. Please engage me in your service. Whereas these other things I've just mentioned, it's all like, yeah, great. Krishna's great. Okay, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.